Hello, everyone. Good evening. So today I've been thinking a lot about the elevations in the Great Pyramid. By that, I mean the way that it looks when you take a slice through it, portray it. This is a really excellent source book. The Pyramid, sorry for bumping the microphone, The Pyramids of Egypt by I.E.S. Edwards. So you've got everything in there. That's the section of the Great Pyramid showing the so-called Grand Gallery, the so-called Queen's Chamber, so-called King's Chamber, and these weird things that some people call ventilation shafts, some people call star shafts. Something that Matt Simpson at Ancient Architects channel has pointed out, and something that I was also thinking of this, and I was glad to see him cover the topic, is the idea that maybe the pyramid was built in phases. Because the idea is the Great Pyramids, there's really only three like them. If you look at the other pyramids that had mud brick interiors and limestone casings, there are a lot more of those. And maybe the ones that are limestone all the way through were ones that were built on top of existing mastabas or existing other smaller pyramids. I think that makes a lot of sense. But looking at this, I decided to investigate what happens with these star shafts. I was revisiting Fingerprints of the Gods, not Magicians of the Gods, Fingerprints of the Gods, the early one by Graham Hancock. And he was talking about an Italian astronomer, I think an Italian astronomer, I forget the name exactly. He was talking about how not only encoding pi in the ratio of the height of the Great Pyramid to the perimeter of its base is the ratio of 2 pi. This guy thought that the Great Pyramid was a model of the northern hemisphere. So I thought, well, that's interesting. What would it be like if you had like a pyramid projection? If the pyramid were the top half of a globe, if you put a globe on a tetrahedron, or is it octahedron? If you could create an octahedron globe projection, I might look up what that is. Where would all the continents and everything fall if that was the case? I think that would be pretty interesting to find out. The so-called star shafts don't point to anything in terms of that map projection. I looked at that. Then I was made to be curious about where the stars go, the supposed star alignments, and I found out something really interesting. Not only, I made this, Matt's done something similar. You see how that looks. Now, if you see where, this is something else I found out, that the so-called skeptics who were calling people inaccurate put out a section of the Great Pyramid that differs greatly. The specific elevations on here are quite different than they are on. I apologize for the lack of fanciness here. They're quite different than on other elevation sections. So it's hard to know what the right one was, but I still proportionally taking a hemisphere, a polar hemisphere projection of the Earth and plotting how high up that it's kind of weird and spooky that the Great Pyramid of Giza is almost exactly at 30 degrees, 30 degrees, 30 degrees east, 30 degrees north, almost exactly. When the British were choosing latitude, that's I can see how they would have thought that was fun with Greenwich, and how that could be a coincidence or deliberate on behalf of the British Naval Academy. But the idea of it being built at 30 degrees between the pole and the equator, that seems odd. So I found out something very interesting, that the north shafts, that is on, you can see the north shafts here. The north shafts are supposed to point towards what the Egyptians believe to be the eternal ones. Now, the skeptic websites were saying, oh, they don't really point towards anything. Yeah, the Egyptians could have done that, but we really have no evidence. Balderdash. Yes, we do have evidence. Specifically at Saqqara, there is a statue of Djoser, a statue of Djoser with two holes. We have precedent for these pointing at stars. In Saqqara, in the Saqqara pyramid, there's a statue of the pharaoh sitting there and two holes that do point to the North Star. Now, oh, but the heavens change, don't they? Well, yes, but the North Star is always the North Star. There isn't always a North Star, but whenever it is, if you point something at the North Star, then thousands of years later, when there's a different North Star, it still points there. So if they pointed something at back during the time of Djoser, it would have been close to Thuban. It's going to be at or close to Polaris now, Thuban in the Tale of Draco. But I was looking at what the other people were saying, and they were saying that there are two shafts. There's the Queen's Chamber shaft. By the way, the interesting thing about the Queen's Chamber shaft is that it stops. So Matt's hypothesis here, and I agree with him, is that indicates, the Queen's Chamber stopping indicates where the smaller pyramid and or mastaba was. It's also very interesting in this that you have the well shaft. The well shaft is beginning right at the point where the tunnel to the Queen's Chamber goes flat, as if that used to be a mastaba, with the Queen's Chamber being a temple on top of a mastaba. I think this is very, very likely. So, and it would be a weird way to build the pyramid. People have talked this over and over again, that if you're building it deliberately from scratch, this is an incredibly weird way to build it and a weird way to make the tunnels. But this is quite possibly because it was built in phases. Now, something that's very interesting about the star shafts is the star shafts might give us a clue as to the timing of these phases. So I don't know if this is accurate at all or not, but the skeptic websites say that these shafts on the north side point to the eternal stars, the circumpolar stars, just kind of without exactly pointing at one or the other. And then the people who say that it does point at them say that they point to a, let me bring up what that said here, that it points to Kohab and Thuban. Kohab being on the, if you think of the Little Dipper as it's the part of the Dipper where, if it's right side up, if the Dipper's right side up, it's the top corner of the Dipper that is not connected to the handle. That's the star Kohab. And then Thuban is in Draco. Well, those are both, the interesting thing about that is those are both North Stars. Those are both North Stars, and they are about 2,000 years of precession. Precession is the wobbling of the pole, or if you talk to some people, it's the orbit of the sun around Sirius, because that's another video. Sirius doesn't precess. The other stars do. Sirius doesn't. If Sirius is not precessing, that means Sirius is moving in relative to our sun in a unique way. So with these two stars being about 2,000 years of precession apart, even if they weren't pointing, even if the Egyptians weren't pointing at a specific star, if they were pointing in a general area, the difference in the angles of this general area that they're pointing to is about 2,000 years of precession different. That's one zodiacal. That's another thing to look into, is what parts of the zodiac are they pointing to, because they're pretty much either 2,000 years of precession or one-ish potentially section of the zodiac away. So it might be that this phase of the pyramid, where those Queen's Chamber shafts, so-called Queen's Chamber shafts, are were built in something like 4500 BC, with the larger ones being built at 2500 BC. So something to think about. If anybody has any ideas, criticisms, questions, topics that you'd like me to cover, etc., comment below. Of course, like and subscribe. Again, thank you so much for watching.